The world has a different sound when you are the last one in the office. It's not silent. It's a symphony of dormant technology. The faint, persistent hum of the server room down the hall, the intermittent groan of the building's climate control system, and the whisper of the overnight cleaning crews vacuum a floor below. This was my element. My name is Leona Vance, though everyone calls me Leah, and for 5 years, the nocturnal heartbeat of Aethel Technologies was the rhythm to which I built my life. I was a senior developer, an architect of digital futures, and I believed with the fervent passion of a true acolyte in the company's motto, "Innovate the future." I wasn't just coding. I was laying down bricks for a cathedral I hoped to one day lead. The idea for Chronos didn't strike me like a lightning bolt. It was a slow, steady dawn, a conviction that grew with every logistical nightmare I witnessed in the global supply chain. It was an ecosystem, a living, breathing digital nervous system. Imagine a platform that could not just track a shipping container from Shanghai to Rotterdam, but could feel the atmospheric pressure change, hinting at a typhoon, could calculate the political ripple effects of a new tariff, could learn the idiosyncrasies of a specific port manager's schedule. It was predictive, prescient, and it had the potential to save industry's billions. I called it Chronos, after the primordial god of time, because it wasn't just about navigating space, but about mastering the very fabric of time itself. For 9 months, Chronos was my secret child. I nurtured it in the stolen hours between midnight and 4 a.m., on a partitioned drive of my personal laptop, far from the prying eyes of Aethel's corporate servers. I had seen what happened to good ideas here. They were diluted in committee, stripped for parts, or claimed as company property because someone had once checked an email about them on a corporate machine. My paranoia was a shield. I sketched its neural networks on the backs of receipts, mumbled its algorithms into my voice memos during my morning run, and dreamed in lines of elegant, efficient code. My shield, however, had a chink, a flaw not in my code but in my own heart, a desperate, aching need to be seen, to be validated. That flaw had a name, Julian Croft. Julian was the CEO, a man who wore his silver fox charisma like a custom-tailored suit. He was a master of the grand vision, the inspirational speech that left you feeling both valued at ND Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. At the annual company retreat in Napa, he had cornered me by the fire pit, a glass of expensive bourbon in his hand. "Leah," he'd said, his voice a confidential murmur that cut through the chatter. "My quiet genius, I've been watching you. There's an intensity in you, a focus. I know you're cooking up something world-changing in that brilliant head of yours. Don't keep it locked away. My door is always open. Bring it to me." It was a siren's song, and I, the foolish and hopeful sailor, steered my ship directly onto the rocks. His words watered the seed of my ambition, and it grew into a treacherous vine that would soon strangle my better judgment. I spent 2 weeks crafting a presentation that was a piece of my soul rendered in PowerPoint. I built a stunning visual demo, ran complex simulations with real-world data, and called in a major favor from a former classmate, now a whiz-kid financier on Wall Street, to get brutally realistic profit projections. The numbers were so astronomical they felt like science fiction, but my friend assured me they were conservative. I was terrified, exhilarated, and utterly convinced this was my moment. The day of the meeting, I walked into Julian's corner office, a sanctuary of glass, polished steel, and breathtaking, arrogant views of the city. He was all warm smiles and firm handshakes, guiding me to a plush leather chair that felt like a throne and a trap all at once. "Leah, at last, I've been looking forward to this. The whispers are getting louder. Show me what you've got." For 45 minutes, I laid myself bare. I didn't just present Chronos, I performed it. I walked him through the beating heart of the algorithm, the adaptive learning core I called the loom. I showed him how it wove together disparate data streams into a tapestry of pure insight. I demonstrated its user interface, so intuitive it felt like magic. And then I showed him the financials. The room grew still. Julian's usual patter of charming interruptions ceased. He was rapt, leaning so far forward his elbows were on his knees, his eyes reflecting the glow of my laptop screen like a man seeing a holy grail. When I finished, the silence was profound. He stood slowly and walked to the window, his back to me, staring out at his kingdom. "Leah," he said, his voice hushed with what I mistook for awe. "This is transcendent. This isn't a product, it's a legacy. It's the kind of idea that defines a company for a generation." My heart swelled, a painful, hopeful pressure in my chest. This was it, the recognition I had craved. He turned, his expression now one of a seasoned general assessing a battlefield. "But we have to be strategic. The board, they're a cautious, old money bunch. They get nervous about projects that hinge on a single, brilliant mind. If I walk in there and say, Leah Vance built this in her basement, they'll pick it apart. They'll demand committees, oversight, and they'll dilute it until it's just another software update." A cold trickle of dread started its slow descent down my spine. "What are you saying, Julian?" "I'm saying we need to frame this for success," he said, moving behind his desk and leaning towards me, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I need to present this as a strategic, executive-led initiative. My initiative. With the full weight of the C-suite behind it, the funding will be approved overnight. The best resources in the company will be at your disposal. You'll still be the lead architect, the visionary in the trenches. This is your baby. But we need to make it our baby to get it across the finish line. It's about optics, Leah. Pure optics." It sounded so logical. It was the kind of corporate chess I was naive about. He was offering to be my knight to clear the path for my king. The cold dread in my gut was screaming, but the desperate hope in my heart was a roaring crowd, drowning it out. I wanted Chronos to live. I wanted it to change the world. I nodded, my throat tight. "Okay," I whispered, the word feeling like a surrender. "If you think that's what it takes." "I know it is," he said, his smile returning, wider now, triumphant. "This is going to be incredible. Leave the presentation with me. All the files, the code, everything. I'll take it from here. Get ready, Leah. Your life is about to change." I transferred everything to a secure company, drive he specified, the digital equivalent of handing over the crown jewels. I walked out of that office feeling like I was floating, my head spinning with visions of glory. For a week, I was electric, buzzing with an anticipation so sharp it was almost painful. I waited for the company-wide announcement, for my team to be assembled, for the journey to begin. The announcement came not with a fanfare, but with a deafening silence, broken by the ping of a company-wide email. From Julian Croft, CEO. Subject, the future is here. Introducing Aethel Stream. The blood drained from my face so fast I felt lightheaded. The email detailed a groundbreaking executive-led initiative to develop a revolutionary logistics platform. The description was my Chronos presentation, plagiarized almost verbatim. The core functionality, the market analysis, the staggering revenue projections, it was all mine. But my name was conspicuously, brutally absent. It was hailed as Julian Croft's visionary project, the culmination of months of intensive R&D by our top-tier strategy team. I sat at my desk, the world tilting on its axis. The betrayal was not just an act, it was an annihilation. He hadn't just stolen my idea, he had erased me from its history. I had handed him the keys to my kingdom, and he had not only locked me out but had torn down the sign with my name on it and erected a statue of himself in the courtyard. The office around me became a gallery of pitying glances and averted eyes. I was a ghost, a cautionary tale walking the halls. A few days later, the formal invitation came. I was assigned to the Aethel Stream project, not as the lead architect, but as a senior coding specialist. My new manager was a freshly promoted VP from sales, a man named Brendan whose understanding of the technology was so superficial he once asked me if we could add more cloud to the interface. I was in a meeting, listening to Brendan clumsily explain the project's core vision, using my own stolen slides, when my personal phone vibrated with a notification. It was a LinkedIn message. The name that appeared on the screen made my heart stop, then restart with a painful, hopeful lurch. It was from Alistair Vance, the founder and CEO of OmniLogic, Aethel Technologies, most formidable and direct competitor. The message was terrifyingly, electrifyingly simple. "Ms. Vance, heard the news about Aethel Stream. The concept sounds familiar. I believe we should talk discreetly. AV. I closed the message and looked up at Brendan, who was now drawing nonsensical arrows on a whiteboard. Julian Croft had pushed me into the shadows, thinking I would disappear. But he was wrong. It was in the shadows that my vision sharpened. He wanted to play the thief. Fine. But he forgot that the original architect knows every secret passage, every hidden flaw in the foundation, and exactly where to place the charges to bring the whole castle down. A slow, cold smile, the first genuine one in weeks, touched my lips. The game, it seemed, was just beginning. The message from Alistair Vance was a live wire in the palm of my hand, its current humming through the numbness that had encased me since the betrayal. For the rest of that torturous day, I could feel its phantom vibration against my leg, a secret promise ticking away beneath the surface of my corporate captivity. Every time Brendan, my new manager, mispronounced a technical term or butchered the logic of my own algorithm, my fingers would twitch, craving the solidity of my phone, that tether to a world where my intellect wasn't a commodity to be stolen, but a weapon to be wielded. Julian's theft had carved out a hollow in my chest, but Vance's message was a spark thrown into that void, and a new, determined fire was beginning to catch. I waited until I was safe, locked within the four walls of my apartment with the city's indifferent lights winking outside my window before I dared to craft a reply. My hands trembled slightly. What was the tone? A desperate plea for salvation? A righteous declaration of war? Neither would suffice. This had to be a negotiation between equals, or at least the convincing performance of one. I had to present myself as a strategic asset, a queen offering a checkmate move, not a pawn seeking rescue. My reply was brief, calibrated to mirror his own succinct power. Mr. Vance, the situation is indeed one of mutual interest. I am available to talk. His response was nearly instantaneous, as if he'd been waiting, his finger poised over the screen. He proposed a meeting not at the gleaming, glass-and-steel headquarters of OmniLogic, but at a place called the Athenaeum Club, a private establishment downtown known for its discretion and its clientele of old money and silent power. The location itself was a message. This was deniable, off the grid, and serious. The following evening, I walked into the hushed, hallowed halls of the Athenaeum. The air smelled of old leather, polished wood, and whispered deals. My heels sank into thick Persian rugs, and the sound was swallowed whole by the immense, book-lined silence. I felt like an imposter, a young tech visionary trespassing in a museum of traditional power. A steward, silent as a ghost, led me to a secluded nook in the library, where a man sat in a deep, oxblood leather wingback chair, a crystal tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. Alistair Vance was the antithesis of Julian Croft. Where Julian was all polished surfaces and radiant performative warmth, Vance was carved from granite and shadow. He was in his late 50s, with a lean, hawk-like face, a close-cropped gray beard, and eyes that held a frightening, penetrating stillness. He didn't stand up or offer a smile. He simply gestured with his glass towards the empty chair opposite him. "Ms. Vance, sit." His voice was a low, gravelly baritone, devoid of social niceties. It was a voice used to giving commands that were obeyed. "I've reviewed your graduate thesis from MIT. The work on recursive neural networks for pattern disruption was intellectually elegant." He had done his homework. This was not a fishing expedition. This was a predator who had already scented blood. "Thank you," I managed, my throat dry. "It feels like it was written by a different person." "Before Aethel sanded down your edges," he stated, a simple, brutal fact. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, the ice clinking softly in the profound quiet. "Now, tell me about Chronos, not the sanitized version Croft is peddling. Tell me about your child." And so I did. But this time, the telling was different. I was not the hopeful creator pitching a dream. I was a general presenting a battlefield map, pointing to the enemy's stolen fortifications and explaining their fatal weaknesses. I laid out the entire chronology with forensic detail, from the first line of code written in my apartment at 2 a.m. to the final, fateful slide in Julian's office. I explained the loom, the proprietary adaptive core that made Chronos breathe. The part of the blueprint I had never fully documented, and that Julian's team was clearly failing to replicate. I described how Ethel's stream was a grotesque parody, a body without a central nervous system, trying to simulate life with a clumsy series of pre-programmed commands. Vance listened, utterly motionless, his gaze never leaving my face. He was a black hole absorbing light, offering no reflection. When I finished, the silence stretched, thick and heavy. He finally swirled the liquor in his glass, the sound unnaturally loud. "Croft was always a brilliant synthesizer but a mediocre originator," he said, a flicker of cold disdain in his eyes. "He mistakes the map for the territory. He has your map, but you know the quicksand, the hidden paths, the fertile ground." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, the intensity in his gaze pinning me to my seat. "So the central question, Leona, what is your objective? A lawsuit? A public shamming in the tech journals? Those are long, draining wars of attrition. You might win, but you'll be a ghost by the end of it. A cautionary tale with a modest settlement." I met his gaze, the fire he had ignited now burning steady and bright within me. "I don't want to sue him," I said, my voice low and unwavering. "I want to annihilate him in the marketplace. I want to build Chronos, the real Chronos, and I want to launch it before his hollowed-out version, Aethel Stream, can even stumble out of the gate. I want to be standing on the main stage at the Global Logistics Summit in Berlin, demonstrating a finished, superior product, while he's still backstage trying to remember his lines. I want his visionary launch to be a funeral, and I want to be the one who handed him the shovel." A slow, terrifying, and utterly genuine smile spread across Alistair Vance's face. It transformed him from a stone monument into a wolf. "Now that," he purred, "is a language I am fluent in, poetic justice, delivered not by lawyers, but by the unforgiving hand of the free market." He laid out his offer. It was breathtaking in its audacity and its generosity. OmniLogic would bankroll a completely secret, off-the-books project, codenamed Project Kairos. I would be its founder and CEO, with a founder's salary and a staggering equity stake in the resulting subsidiary. I would have carte blanche to recruit a team and access to OmniLogic's vast resources, their engineers, their server infrastructure, their global client contacts for beta testing. But it came with one non-negotiable condition: brutal, impossible speed. "The Global Logistics Summit in Berlin is in 9 months, Vance said, his eyes glinting like chips of flint. "That is Croft's chosen battlefield for his coming-out party. I want Kairos to debut there, one day before his keynote. I want to steal his audience, his thunder, his clients, and his legacy before he even has a chance to take the stage." It was an insane timeline, a Herculean task, but staring into Vance's determined eyes, feeling the weight of my own fury and ambition, it felt like the only timeline. Following months became a masterclass in leading a double life, a tightrope walk over an abyss of discovery. By day, I was Leah the subdued, the dutiful senior coding specialist at Aethel. I made myself small, quiet, and unthreatening. I attended the interminable Aethel Stream meetings, a ghost at the feast, silently collecting intelligence. The project was a beautiful disaster unfolding in slow motion. Without my intimate understanding of the loom, their platform was brittle, slow, and illogical. They were trying to build a skyscraper with blueprints for a bungalow. The weekly progress reports were a litany of delayed sprints, critical bugs, and mounting frustration. Julian's grand vision was cracking under the weight of its own stolen, incomplete foundation. By night and on weekends, I was the commander of Project Kairos. Vance had provided a secure, unmarked office space in a nondescript building in a different tech corridor, access to which was governed by biometric scanners and a level of paranoia I deeply appreciated. My first and most critical mission was recruitment. I couldn't build this with strangers. I needed a ghost legion, people I trusted with my secret and my vengeance. I started with Anya Sharma, Aethel's lead UI/UX designer, a woman with the soul of an artist and the mind of a logician. We met at a quiet, independent coffee shop far from corporate eyes. "Anya," I said, skipping the small talk, "you've seen the Aethel Stream specs, the user flow diagrams. Give me your professional, unfiltered opinion." She let out a short, derisive laugh. "Leah, it's a dumpster fire. The back-end architecture they sent us is a contradictory mess. The logic is inelegant. It's like a child trying to assemble IKEA furniture without the instructions. She leaned in, her voice dropping. I heard it was your idea, originally. It was, I confirmed, holding her gaze. And I'm building it, the real version, outside of Aethel. I need the best interface designer on the planet. I need you. I showed her the early Kairos wireframes and the working prototype of the Loom's visual output on my secured tablet. Her eyes, which had been dulled by months of corporate compromise, widened, then ignited with the fierce joy of a creator presented with a perfect, blank canvas. She was in, without a second's hesitation. Next was Ben Cruz Rodriguez, our legendary DevOps engineer, a sarcastic genius who communicated in code and pop culture references. His loyalty was to elegant systems, not to corporate logos. When I approached him, his response was pure Cruz. Croft stole your brainchild. You're kidding me, I am shocked. Shocked, well, not that shocked, he deadpanned. He looked at the offer, then back at me. Let me get this straight. You're building the real thing in secret to publicly humiliate the suit who took credit for it. And you want me to make the servers sing for your symphony of chaos. Leah, that's the most beautiful proposition I've heard since they announced the new Star Wars trilogy. I'm in. Let's go break the internet. One by one, I built my team of phantoms. We were a secret society operating in plain sight, our energy and brilliance funneled into Kairos while our doppelgangers sleepwalked through the decaying project at Aethel. The atmosphere in our hidden office was electric, a stark contrast to the funereal vibe at Aethel. We were building something world-changing, and the shared mission, the righteous cause, bonded us like soldiers in a trench. Months melted into a blur of code, caffeine, and clandestine meetings with Vance. Kairos was not just taking shape, it was evolving, becoming something more fluid, more intelligent, more beautiful than my original conception for Chronos. We were not just building a product, we were forging a predator. One evening, about 6 months in, I was leaving Aethel late when I literally bumped into Julian Croft at the elevator bank. He looked tired, the Silver Fox charm looking tarnished, the lines on his face deeper. Leah, he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Burning the midnight oil on Aethel's stream, that's the dedication I like to see. We're counting on you, you know, the entire company is. The hypocrisy was a physical blow. Just doing my job, Julian, I replied, my voice a perfect, neutral mask. He clapped me on the shoulder, the same gesture he'd used when he'd sold me his lies. You're a team player, Leah. I knew I could count on you. This project. It's going to make us all legends. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. He stepped out, leaving me standing there. I watched him walk away, the architect of my ruin, utterly oblivious that the very ground he was walking on was being mined by the one person he had deemed expendable. The fire within me, once a spark, was now a contained, white-hot inferno. He was counting on me all right. He just had no idea what for. The Berlin air carried a distinct charge, a mixture of exhaust fumes from the endless stream of black sedans disgorging executives onto the curb, and the palpable tension of billions of dollars in potential deals hanging in the balance. The Global Logistics Summit was the gladiatorial arena of our industry, and today I was no longer a spectator in the stands. I was a contender, armed not with a trident and net, but with something far more dangerous, the truth, and a product that could shatter a carefully constructed lie. From my hotel room window, I watched the ant-like figures scurrying towards the massive Mess Berlin Convention Center, a general surveying the battlefield at dawn. My reflection in the glass was a stranger, sharper, harder, imbued with a calm, lethal certainty. The anxious, betrayed programmer was a ghost. In her place stood Leah Vance, CEO of Kairos, clad in a suit of armor tailored from Italian wool and quiet vengeance. The 9-month crucible of double lives and secret development had forged me into this. We had done the impossible. Kairos wasn't just functional, it was a work of art, a digital demigod ready for its unveiling. Julian Croft and his Aethel entourage had arrived the previous day with the bombastic flair he adored. I'd seen the curated social media posts, him, the visionary, holding court in the hotel's grand bar, surrounded by sycophants, toasting the imminent global domination of Aethel's stream. His keynote was scheduled for tomorrow in the massive 3,000-seat main hall, the summit's prime slot. Ours was today in a smaller 500-seat auditorium. But I knew, in the age of viral news and live-tweeted revolutions, the size of the stage was irrelevant. It was the magnitude of the earthquake that mattered. Alistair Vance found me, a rare, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "The hyenas are restless, Leah," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "The industry knows Aethel's stream is wounded. They can smell the blood in the water. They're gathered here, waiting for a kill. They just don't know we're about to hand them the spear." He was right. For weeks, the trade publications had been filled with thinly veiled concerns about Aethel's rushed development cycle and technical hurdles. The market was skeptical. Julian's entire strategy was to use his grand keynote to silence the doubters with a dazzling performance, to blind everyone with showmanship. He had no idea we were about to plunge his entire world into darkness. As I walked onto the stage, the lights were blinding, reducing the audience to a sea of silhouettes. My heart wasn't pounding with fear, but with a cold, focused fury. I saw Anya and Cruz in the front row, their faces etched with a mixture of pride and battle-ready tension. This was for them. For every stolen idea, every erased contributor, every quiet genius who had been told to be a team player. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the expectant murmur. "For decades, the global supply chain has been a monument to reactive strategy. You forecast, you plan, and when reality inevitably deviates, a storm, a strike, a blockade, you scramble. You absorb the losses, you apologize to clients, you play a constant, expensive game of catch-up." I paused, letting the frustrating truth of that reality settle in the room. I saw nods of recognition from grizzled logistics veterans. "What if you could stop reacting?" I asked, my voice dropping to a more intimate, powerful register. "What if your logistics network wasn't just intelligent, but anticipatory? What if it didn't just tell you where your container was, but where it needed to be to avoid a crisis you can't even see yet?" I clicked the presenter. The screen behind me erupted to life with a single, elegant word, rendered in a sleek, modern font that Anya had designed: Kairos. For the next 45 minutes, I didn't give a presentation. I conducted a symphony of destruction. I used the exact same, complex hypothetical scenarios I had crafted for Julian in his office nearly a year ago. A Category 4 hurricane brewing in the Atlantic, a critical supplier's factory in Taiwan going offline due to a fire, a sudden, unexpected port closure in Rotterdam. But with Kairos, the solutions were not just fast. They were breathtakingly elegant, almost prescient. The interface was a masterpiece of intuitive design. And the loom, the heart of my creation, learned and adapted in real time during the demo, proposing a solution to the port closure that involved a multimodal, cross-border handoff so brilliantly efficient, a gasp went through the audience. I could feel the energy in the room shift from polite interest to rapt attention, then to stunned awe. This wasn't corporate vaporware. This was a revolution, working flawlessly before their eyes. Then, I delivered the coup de grace. "I know some of you may be looking at this, feeling a sense of déjà vu," I said, my tone shifting to one of gravitas. "You may have heard promises of a similar platform, one heralded as a visionary leap forward. And that's because the foundational spark for this adaptive logistics engine was, in fact, conceived over a year ago." I clicked to a new slide. It was a simple, dated screenshot of my original Chronos logo, the one I had designed on my personal laptop and shown only to one person. "I called it Chronos," I said, letting the name hang in the hushed auditorium. "I believed in it so deeply that I presented the complete vision with all my data and code to my then CEO, trusting he would help me build it. Instead, he took the blueprint, erased my name, and launched it as his own brainchild. He is scheduled to speak tomorrow about his version, which he calls Aethel Stream." A wave of murmurs, sharp and scandalized, rippled through the crowd. I had just detonated a bomb in the heart of the industry's most prestigious event. "But a blueprint is just a drawing," I continued, my voice dropping to a forceful, confidential whisper. "It doesn't include the soul. It doesn't include the deep, intuitive understanding of why it works or the relentless innovation that comes from true ownership. What you have seen today is not the stolen blueprint. This is the living, breathing, fully realized vision. This is Kairos, and our partnership portal is open for business, effective immediately. I didn't need to say Julian's name. The connection was made. The applause that erupted was thunderous, a visceral release of pent-up energy, not just for the technology, but for the drama, for the story of the wronged creator triumphing. I had successfully reframed the narrative. Julian was the thief. I was the true visionary. The rest of the day was a whirlwind. Our booth was swamped. Our demos were standing room only. Business cards were pressed into my hands. Offers of urgent meetings were made before I'd even left the stage. We were the undisputed story of the summit. The next day, I took a seat in the very last row of the massive main hall for Julian's keynote. The atmosphere was palpably different. Where there had been anticipation, there was now a morbid, cynical curiosity. The hall was packed, but the air was thick with schadenfreude. Julian walked on stage to a polite, scattered applause that died quickly. He looked haggard, the charismatic facade cracked, revealing the desperate man beneath. He began his presentation, and it was a painful, slow-motion car crash. He was using my old slides, my old demo scenarios, but his version of Aethel's stream was sluggish and clumsy. When he triggered the hurricane scenario, the system stuttered, the map flickering, before finally suggesting a generic, inefficient reroute that would have cost a fortune in fuel and delays. A wave of derisive laughter echoed in the hall. He stumbled over his words, his voice losing its signature confidence. He was trying to sell a candle in a room where everyone had just seen electric light. 20 minutes in, a mass exodus began. Executives stood up, conversations started, the crowd thinning like a receding tide. The silent verdict was more brutal than any boo. I stood and left, walking out into the crisp Berlin air. I didn't need to witness the final, humiliating collapse. I had already seen his empire fall. My phone buzzed in my pocket, then buzzed again, and again. I finally pulled it out. The screen showed a name I hadn't seen in almost a year. Julian Croft, we need to talk, now. I didn't reply, he called. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, the vibration frantic, insistent. On the fourth call, I answered, holding the phone to my ear in silence. Leah, his voice was a ragged, broken thing. Leah, what have you done? I built my idea, Julian, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. You should try it sometime. It's remarkably fulfilling. You've ruined me, he hissed, the whisper fraying into a scream. You've destroyed Aethel's stream. The board is an emergency session. They're going to fire me. No, Julian, I corrected him softly, the sound of traffic a dull roar around me. You did that the moment you decided my ambition was a resource for you to plunder. You didn't build Aethel's stream. You built a house of cards on a foundation of my work. I just waited for the wind to change. I could hear his ragged breathing, the sound of a man trapped in a cage of his own making. I'll sue you. I'll own Kairos. I'll prove it was developed with Aethel IP. A cold laugh escaped my lips. You are welcome to try. My lawyers have a meticulously time-stamped, encrypted record of every line of code I wrote for Chronos, dating back 18 months. All we have to do is enter discovery. I wonder what your internal emails from our meeting will reveal, Julian. I'm sure the board and the shareholders would find them absolutely fascinating reading. The silence on the other end was total. It was the sound of checkmate. He had nothing. Goodbye, Julian, I said. I have a company to run. I ended the call and blocked his number. I looked up at the sky, the sun breaking through the Berlin clouds. The weight was gone. The anger, the betrayal, the countless sleepless nights, it had all been transmuted, alchemized into something solid, powerful, and mine. A month later, Julian Croft was officially ousted as CEO of Aethel Technologies. Aethel's stream was shelved, a billion-dollar ghost written off as a loss. The press eviscerated him, painting him as a fraudulent leader who had tried to build an empire on stolen ideas. Kairos, meanwhile, signed 4 of the world's top 10 shipping conglomerates in our first quarter. We weren't just successful, We were a phenomenon, the new gold standard. Weeks after the launch, I stood in my new office at Kairos headquarters, the real one, with my name etched on the door. Anya, Cruz, and the entire team were celebrating our first major contract with champagne that Alistair Vance had sent. The mood was electric, triumphant. As I looked around at their faces, my team, my co-conspirators, my family, I realized the revenge was never the point. It was the reclamation. Julian Croft had tried to steal my future and claim it as his own. In doing so, he forced me to build a better one, a grander one, than I had ever dared to imagine. He wanted to be a legend built on a lie. I had become a leader built on the unshakable truth of what we can achieve when we refuse to be silenced. The poetic justice was perfect. He hadn't just lost his company, he had become the industry's cautionary tale. And I hadn't just gotten my idea back, I had used it to build a legacy that was, from the first line of code to the final, triumphant demo, unquestionably and powerfully my own.